Teachers online. Yeah. So I'm going to be showing you all a PowerPoint. So I will share my screen, and I might ask you from time to time when I jump from one thing to the next, if you still see it, because sometimes it doesn't. So I'm hoping you see right now overview and writing tips for AMH 2020 and POS 1041, and overview of the civic literacy test. Is that what both of y'all see? You can just put thumbs up or put yes, or just say yes by now. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the first slide is just, this is what we're going to go over today. We're going to look at the class objective, and for AMH, we're looking at two types of sources, but you also use these primary and secondary sources in political science. So we didn't put it under both because it would be redundant. And then possible paper types. So the types of paper you might do in AMH are a bit different than political science. Then we'll look at the class objectives, terminology and definitions, because that can be one of your papers, and possible paper types. And then we'll talk a little bit about civic literacy exam. And we do workshop on these, so if you want to come to them, you can. So there is a difference between AMH and POS. I like to do this early so that you, when you're taking your course, you can think about the structure, especially how it would relate to something like the civic literacy test. In the American history, of course, you're looking and focusing on things in the past and how it affects our future. So it is definitely a lot into chronological learning. So you're going to start, I think the book starts at 1850 and moves all the way up to at least 9/11. And so then you'll look at cause and effect relationships, interpret primary sources to analyze past perspectives, and seek to understand the past to inform the present and the future. Where in political science, you'll see this inform the present and the future. You're looking at the future and seeing how the past brought that up. Why are people saying certain things? So you'll look at political systems as well, theories and behavior, power structures, institutions, processes, and you're going to apply these and analyze, and both groups analyze. And then you're going to seek to understand and explain political phenomena today based on history. So the first group we look at the AMH 2020, which is the history of the US. The course objectives, this is very interesting to note. If you look at the outcomes, it will be the same for outcome 1, 2, and 3, with the exception of what period of time you're going to be focusing on. So outcome 1 will say describe, analyze, evaluate the racial, economic, political aspects of Reconstruction, Gilded Age, and Progressive eras, and explain how the major events and developments of these eras impacted the course of American history. Then you're going to examine and analyze presidential administrations and major Supreme Court cases of these eras. So this will definitely, when we get to the part about civic literacy, you'll see how this fits very nicely into what you need for civic literacy. And now outcome 2 is exactly the same, except the period of time changes. You're going to start from World War I and go through the Roaring 20s and the Great Depression. But everything else is exactly the same. And then you're going to look at World War II to the modern day. So these are, and they'll actually go through these 3 different areas as you study. And you'll look at these, which will fit very nicely into the tests that will be required. So there's 2 types of sources that you'll be looking at. And people in political science, you guys need to listen as well, because I saw Mercy popped in, but I don't know if she's AMH or POS. You can tell me which one you're favoring, but primary sources will be used by both, but in a different way. In the primary source, you'll be looking, and if you're taking AMH 2020, you're looking at the history. This is a Anne Frank's diary, but it could be anything. They have newspapers from 1690 to the present. They have a New York Times from 1850 to the present. So you can actually look at news reports, you can look at speeches, diaries, letters, and you'll be looking at them historically, and photographs, videos, audio. And in photographs, I actually like looking at political cartoons. Old political cartoons can tell you a lot about what was happening and what the views of the people were at a specific time. So primary sources are fantastic to use. You'll be using them to write your own secondary source papers, but you'll also use secondary sources. Secondary sources are any of the books that are talking about history, or a journal article talking about history. So they actually will be writing about one of those primary sources. So if you read the Diary of Anne Frank and you comment on it, that Diary of Anne Frank is a primary source. But if you read something that someone writes about the Diary of Anne Frank, then you're using your secondary source. So you need to use both in these courses. I love it. Those taking American history, one of the instructors, and he's a faculty, so he has many classes, likes to do the museum tour. So we have several museums in Tallahassee, and you can go and usually they let you pick which one you want to take, and you go and you visit it, and you will write about your experience. You take selfies, you write about the exhibit, and then this is the only paper I've seen that was done in the Caribbean style. Everything else uses what's called MLA. For those that did ENC 1101, you probably know exactly what MLA is, but I'll give you a quick show of both of these later in the discussion. And so in the discussion boards, you also may be comparing or writing. So you're writing, it might be a paper and a discussion board, or many long discussion boards. I've seen teachers do both. But this one is a paper, full-blown long paper, like 1,500 pages. But it's fun. I think it's fun. So we'll talk about this formatting and style in a minute. So now we have POS 1041, which is called National Government. In this, it's very interesting, except for the first objective, demonstrate effective information literacy skills by locating information using appropriate tools, which you will do in AMH 2020 as well. This particular one, the rest of the objectives are written exactly like the competencies of the literacy test. So it says, develop and demonstrate an understanding of the basic principles and practices of American democracy and how they are applied in our Republican form of government. And even the term Republican is one of the basic principles that you'll be looking into, and the term sovereignty. So in this particular class, they're looking at the definitions and how it relates to the past, where in history, if these terms come up as you're studying history, you look at them. And so you'll develop and demonstrate an understanding of the United States Constitution and its applications. You both actually will do this, but in a different way. In the history class, you might look at one of the amendments that I like is where they said you can't drink. And you'll be doing that in the history of the Great Depression. And so during the Great Depression, people were drinking too much. The women wanted to change. So they decided we should have the temperance law, and there's an amendment written for that. Later, they ended up getting rid of that. But you'll be looking at that Constitution in terms of the historical moment. People in political science, on the other hand, will be looking at something current, maybe about marijuana. Should we legalize the marijuana? And look at the history of the Constitution to see if we do it when we need to get rid of it, because in this case, we're saying legalize it, and even how you ratify or make that into an amendment you'll be looking at. So both of you will be looking at the same things, but just from different viewpoints. And then this one is the next one is develop and demonstrate knowledge of founding documents and how they have shaped the nature and functions of our institutions and self-governance. The founding documents actually affect history more than you would know. When you're looking at the Federalist Papers, these were written by our founding fathers. If you want to write a Supreme Court case, the people will look at what one of these or more of these letters that were written, there were actually pamphlets that were written by the founding fathers in the Federalist or Anti-Federalist papers to see what was their idea. What did they believe about a specific thing? That's how they know about it. So these founding documents from political science, you'll look at an issue and then go back and look at it. And of course, in the history, you'll look at it from a current thing in history and how did it shape maybe that landmark Supreme Court case. And you will look at, the other people will look at political science, will look at the Supreme Court cases, landmark legislation, landmark executive actions, maybe as a thing in itself, and then look at the historical event, where again, the history, you see this, and it's called landmark for a reason. This is something that our Supreme Court will look at. For example, if it's a landmark Supreme Court case, they'll look at it when they're making a decision for a modern case. So you can see, knowing the history, how does it affect our future? And for the people that are in political science, how these issues that we're looking at today would be interpreted by looking at the past. So it's the same kind of things. In political science, I've seen several teachers or adjuncts having people write definitions. And so these are like pluralistic and elite interest groups I've seen several times. Students will have to write about this. Sometimes they have you use just your textbook. So good idea to buy the textbook. And you'll look at the textbook, and the textbook, it's not like, let's go in the glossary and just read one little definition. It's 3 or 4 pages discussing it. And a lot of times they also want examples. So it's not just write a little definition, open up the dictionary and write it down. So this is something I've seen more in political science than history. But anybody could write about historical documents and how it's relevant to U.S. government. In both classes, I've seen them writing about Constitution in one way or the other. One of the things, I don't even know which class it's in, it will say, which is stronger, the legislative body, the executive body, or the judicial body? And so like I said, I'm not even sure which class that's in, because it could be, again, looking back, or how we see it today. Because right now, our Senate and our House gives a lot of power to the executives. But was that how it was in the historical sense? These are things you'll be looking at. So here's the Terribian. I wanted to show you how a paper might be if you write with, like I said, only one teacher do I know that has the Terribian one paper when you do a museum visit. I think it's a really good experience. Don't freak out if you have to do it. We can support you in the Learning Commons with this. The teachers are really good at writing how to do it. And if you need more help, you can come see us. One of the biggest difference, if you didn't see an MLA, if you know MLA, is instead of doing citations, you do footnotes at the bottom of the page. Also, it has a title page. MLA does not have a title page. Anybody doing psychology may have already done APA that also does a title page. So only MLA doesn't require a title page. So here's the nice example of how they do it. And a big, like sometimes when students don't know what style they're doing, I can just look at their last page. If it's a bibliography, it's Caribbean or Chicago. If it's works cited, it's MLA. If it says references, it's APA. So this is a good clue for us in the Learning Commons if you don't remember. But it's really a good idea to ask the instructor, read inside Canvas if it's going to be MLA, APA, or Caribbean. But in history, like I said, we've only seen one paper with the Caribbean. If you do the visit to one of our local museums, they're history museums. So now I can stop that and go back to so now the Florida literacy exam. This is required by most students, and I'm saying most students. We have a returning student here. She may or may not need it. Some people may have taken APA high school class with the literacy test attached to that APA class, which may count. I tell everybody, go back into your own workday, look and see if you need it. If you can't figure it out, somebody can help you look at your own workday to see if you need to take it. If you need to take it, don't freak out. You can take it as many times as you want. You can schedule your own. Be prepared that some of your instructors, I've seen last semester, schedule for the whole class to take a literacy test in that semester. But again, don't freak out. If you don't pass, you can take it again. I think the best time to take it is when you're in one of these classes, because it helps you. The knowledge is right there in your head and you remember it, than waiting till the end of before you graduate, because you have to do this before you graduate if it's required. You have 80 questions, you only need 60%, which is 48 correct. And like I said, in political science, it's exactly the same objectives: understanding of the basic principles and practices of American democracy and how to apply them to a Republican form, understanding of the United States Constitution and its application, knowledge of the founding documents and how they have shaped the nature and functions of our institutions of self-government. And regardless of which class you take, some of these founding documents, unless you do AMH 2010, you might need to beef up on, but I'll show you where you can get some information to do that, because it might do the Mayflower Compact. And your American History 2020 doesn't, Mayflower Compact, yeah, that's right. Or the Magna Carta, and neither class may cover that, even though it is a document that shaped our Constitution. So this would be something that you might need to focus on after taking the class or while taking the class. And then landmark Supreme Court cases, landmark legislation, landmark executive actions are really important. This is the one that has the most information, because there are lots of landmark Supreme Court cases and legislation and executive actions. And so as you're doing your courses, I suggest that you make like a note page: landmark Supreme Court cases, landmark legislation, like one, just to have one page for each, and add it as you are going through your class. We actually help with the Learning Commons. We have these wonderful workshops on each of the principles. And I also want to show you that we have this on our, if you don't have time and you're working, and you don't have time to do them, you can come to our Learning Commons. This is the Learning Commons website. I mean, this is the TCC website. Notice I typed www.tcc. If you use Google, you have to type www.tcc.fl.edu sometimes, or it says you don't have the page. And this is, I go to resources. It's my way I get to it. You can use those quick links. And then I want to show you the library link, which will help you in your course, and Learning Commons. So for the test, you just scroll down. These are all the wonderful tutor resources we have, but you want to scroll down and do testing resources. And in testing resources, there's Florida Civic Literacy Exam right there. And we tell you where you can schedule your own test. And I would wait and see if your class is going to schedule it. No sense you taking it and then your class doing it again. It has, here's the 4 competencies, which are the same exact competency as the POS class. Here are videos that we did at the Learning Commons in the past of the workshops. Here are just some cool resources if you like Quizlets. This is from the Department of Education, which requires this test. This is a nice resource. You can scroll down, and if there's parts that you want to get more information, like here's founding documents, the Magna Carta, the Mayflower, the English Bill of Rights. These are items. It gives you a list of all the court cases that you need that are required. There's quite a bit of them. And notice, except for the first 2, from 1857 until the present, most likely people taking American history will cover those in your classes in the historical moment. So that's why I said it's really different, the approaches to these 2. But I also wanted to show you that you can take a sample test. It's, again, given by Department of Education. And here's some sample items right here. And you just can go through, and at the end, they give you the answers. So that you can print it out, because this is one of those print. It's not online. You have to circle it or whatever, however you want to do it. So I do want to show you the, oops, these are them, but I want to show you how to get there. I want to show you how to get to your, both classes will be responsible of writing some kind of paper discussion board or definitions. And we have a great team of librarians that set up the databases that best suit the classes you're taking. And they did this with the instructors. So this is for you. You go to the library. If you took English 1101, you may have used this guide before. So we already looked at the citation guide, I think. No, we may not. This is a citation guide for MLA, APA, Caribbean. But we have right here the resource guides. And you just can use this for every single class that you're taking. If you're doing political science or history, right here. And I'll do history first. I don't know why. No reason in general. And you select it and you pick the class you're taking. And here on the left hand of all the resource guides, every single one that the library does for research guides has the same format right here. And so you go right here and do articles and database. And here's they have the newspapers. They have, notice the dates for some of these newspapers. American History, 1690 to 2000. And look at this one, 1851 to 2010. So they have some great resources that you can use for history. You can go and you can, like here, when you have the American history, primary and secondary sources are both here. And in this one, primary and secondary sources are both there. And this is just general scholarly. So these would all be secondary resources, the academic journal. And then I want to go and show you, I did the same thing for political science. Whoops, I don't want to ask a librarian before we started. And here's the political science. And notice it is a little bit different because they set this up for your course. You still need the skill. They want to make sure you know how to use this skill. And so right here, if you're taking English 1102, this will be center-based right here, but they're the same database, opposing viewpoints, because they might ask you, I'm sure they're going to say, don't do gun control, because everybody does gun control. But that might be one of the things, the Second Amendment. So here you want to get both opposing sides for it, but they still have academic search, and it has the scholarly resources, and it has both, this one has both primary and secondary resources. So you still use both. but this one has a little more secondary resources. So if you're using political science, you might use more secondary resources. Another paper I found, and that's why you have this whole section of newspapers down here, quite an array of newspapers in this section here. One of the instructors or several instructors might want you really looking at current events. So political science people read the news or watch the news, but they want you to understand bias. So they'll give you a handout similar to what I'm showing here. And it will have like this, there's the things that are left leaning and the items that are right leaning. So it goes straight across the leftmost and the left leaning, the center, the left right, and the right right. And they might tell you to pick the same topic, but they want you to use resources within these items, each of the items. So this way you can get a better perspective of how news can be biased. And this they do in political science. This is something I haven't seen in American history. And so those are some of the differences that I've seen. And I want to go ahead and close this and let you guys. Oops, I closed the ask questions. The last thing says to ask questions. So do you guys have any questions? I'll stop sharing. Do you guys have any questions? Don't be shy. And I can stop the recording if you want, if that's making you shy, because we did the major. And anybody out there that looks at this online, if you have a question, you can email me at jamie.smith@tcc.fl.edu, and I'll try to answer your question to the best of my ability. And I will stop the recording now.